we've just we've just come out of, but although I don't like to say out of, because really we never come out of them, hopefully, right? We have the Yamim Noraim, our high holidays. So instead of the way Breslovers used to say, it was not, how were the holidays, but not Ech Avru HaChagim, right? How did the holidays go? But how did they come in? Ech Nichnesu HaChagim. So hopefully we're all feeling that our beautiful Yamim Noraim have come in, that they've entered into us, and hopefully we're like in a good and a different, a better place than we were before. We're altered, Bezrat Hashem, I hope, from our Yamim Noraim. And now we are in the month of Mar Cheshvan. Now, Mar Cheshvan, the name of the month, is normally associated, the name of the month is Cheshvan, and it's often called Mar Cheshvan because the flood began in Cheshvan and there are no festivals in Cheshvan. So Mar in Hebrew means bitter, so those are the two aspects of bitterness, potentially. But the sages taught us that Mar Cheshvan is also from the language of Marach Shavan, which means fluttering. And they would say that Mar Cheshvan is the time when your lips are still fluttering with all of the tefillot, all of the prayers of the high holidays. So instead of thinking of it as a month that doesn't have holidays in it, it's lacking festivals, not really true. What it does is it carries over the influence into the year of the high holidays that end right at the end of the month of Tishrei. So it's a perfect time to be focused on Tefillah, leading us forward into, we have 8 weeks from now until the beginning of Hanukkah. So the timing, as far as I feel, is just perfect. And I think our last class is going to be on the first light of Hanukkah, maybe. I think that's how it works, which seems to me good timing. So we're just going to start with that, and this is going to carry us also into what we're doing today. It's a good kind of closure, front and end, because this lesson is actually what I would call a winter lesson. Now, the first things first. In the past, for those who've been, I'm going to open this up a little bit. In the past, for those who've been, doing these courses, so we've had a lot, we've discussed a lot, and it's come up a lot, the subject of hitbodedut, of private prayer, personal prayer, and I think already most of us are familiar with the idea that Rabbi Nachman very much encouraged us to speak to Hashem like we would to our very best friend about absolutely everything in the language that's most comfortable for us, etc. Now, at this point, it's very important to make clear, and that's one of the big focal points of this course, is that just because Rabbi Nachman placed a great emphasis on hitbodedut, it does not mean that he didn't also emphasize the tefillot in the siddur. And because of that, it seems to people who are not so, not that familiar with Rabbi Nachman's, the totality of his work, they might make the mistake of thinking that he emphasized hitbodedut sort of to the, obviously not to the exclusion of the tefillah and the siddur, because the tefillot and the siddur, the regular set tefillot, are part of the order of Jewish life, and it's halacha and so on, but somehow as if it's been de-emphasized. And anyone who's familiar with his work knows, and also with the biographical material and the sort of total picture of Breslov as a way of, as a path, is certainly not lacking emphasis on the order of prayers as they're presented in the siddur. Now, a kind of superficial understanding would place this emphasis on hitbodedut, in a sense of its being spontaneous and being with immediacy and it being yours, personal, etc. It has certain advantages, and Rabbi Nachman did acknowledge that. He made a number of very strong statements about the certain advantages that hitbodedut, that personal prayer does have over the prayer in the siddur, but he was also not meaning to disparage the order of prayers in the siddur. Quite the contrary. The uplifting of the act of prayer, the investment of spiritual vitality in prayer, we can find, and we do find, that the practice of hitbodedut helps us to invest more of ourselves into the siddur, and hopefully, as I'll show you as we go on, Rabbi Nachman spoke about what he called the proper way to pray, or the proper way to say Tehillim, and when he uses that kind of language, what he means is to create hitbodedut out of the siddur. Now, many people, and when I say create hitbodedut, I don't mean that you change the language. Quite the contrary. We have the holy vehicle of the language itself as it's given to us in our particular nusach. Everybody, has their own, whatever is their own customary form of the siddur, because we have different nuschaot. We do have based on your community that you come from. So you have your own particular nusach, your own particular order of the prayers, the siddur that you use. You could use Ashkenaz or Sfard or Edot Mizrach or Tehillat Hashem, or we have variants. We have the Italian nusach or the Gruzini nusach. We have and there were many other variants on nusach Timan, its own nusach Yemen. So all of these variants on the siddur are sort of minor variants one to the other, and it's not really so much about the exact nature of the format. Very interestingly, when Rabbi Nachman was asked by one of his students about whether he should switch his nusach to conform to Rabbi Nachman's own nusach, Rabbi Nachman, he did praise Sfard because his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, had innovated the Sfard nusach that was really for Hasidim, and it had some minor variations it still does have some minor variations, not very significant, but some minor variations from nusach Ashkenaz, from the standard Ashkenazic siddur. And so Rabbi Nachman prayed according to the Sfard custom because that was his great-grandfather's custom, and that's what he did. Students of the Baal Shem Tov and family members of the Baal Shem Tov and so on, all of the world of Hasidim, they tended to follow the Nusach Sfard. The exception to this is the Tehillat Hashem Nusach, which is Nusach HaArizal, as set down by the Balatanya, and it also is very similar to Sfard, but it has some minor variations. But it's not a question of what's the most correct. So Rabbi Nachman's student asked him, should I change to, I daven, at this point I pray Ashkenaz. This is in the early generations of Chassidut. There were many new adherents to the Hasidic path who had never changed their custom, and they had also other customs that was a question mark for them whether they should change it. Now, among other Hasidim, there's already 3 generations into the history of Chassidut by the time we get to Rabbi Nachman, because he was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, when he, so by that time, it was already established practice that someone who became a Chassid would adopt the Nusach Sfard, would adopt this Sfard Siddur, and or in the case of the students of the Balatanya, adopted his Nusach. But either way. And the only difference between them is that the Balatanya, based on what he received from the Maggid, he said that this is actually the more correct version. There's no, and it's also not a very great distinction between them. So we have, so the question was, should I do this, which has become common practice for Hasidim? Do I need to change my nusach? Now, this also came up in the question of whether it was necessary to change the custom. If you had grown up among standard, we'll say regular Ashkenazim, was it necessary to stop eating shruya on Pesach? It's another similar question. And in both cases, Rabbi Nachman said, whatever was your minhag before, you can stay with it. You don't have to change. Which for Hasidim is, I wouldn't even say it's unusual. It's an anomaly, because we don't have some other example of a group of Hasidim who did not take on, whose Rebbe did not feel that it was necessary to change what he considered actually a minor custom. He didn't think that it was significant enough to, and his attitude was, if it's necessary for you, then you can change, but you don't have to change. Just because I pray with this nusach doesn't mean that you have to pray with this nusach. And in defense of nusach Ashkenaz, he said he said, I actually prefer Nusach Ashkenaz, and if it hadn't been for my great grandfather innovating the Nusach Sfard, I would pray Ashkenaz. So we don't know if he said that as a means of making this Hasid feel better for not changing his prayer custom, or if he meant it genuinely. It's a little hard to tell. But either way, this was one of the areas where Rabbi Nachman was quite clear. He did not feel that this is that nusach, the particularities of your nusach, is what we would call ikar hayahadut, that it's an absolute fundamental issue in your Judaism. Prayer is an absolute fundamental issue in your Judaism. Prayer from the siddur is a fundamental issue in your Judaism. But exactly which nusach? Nowadays, you either go according to your family custom, which is based on geography or spiritual community, or nowadays, because we have a lot more flexibility in terms of where we find our spiritual community, so generally speaking, it goes along with where you feel most at home in your prayer practice. So much for Nusach. Now, when we look to the Siddur, when I'm going to be going through, as you know, I want to give you kind of the layout of what we're going to be doing for the next 8 weeks. I'm less interested in the particularities of the nusach, of the actual order and words of the prayers themselves, than with the concepts of each segment of the prayers and what's really being accomplished. So sometimes I'm going to refer to specifics of tefillot, but especially where Rabbi Nachman refers to them. So we do have a few short lessons, where he does refer specifically to certain tefillot, and they're very, and I have found over the years myself that being aware of those short lessons, or these, here and there, the places where he mentions it, has helped my prayer practice very, very much. Again, not hitzbodedut, not my private prayer, but my relationship with the siddur, and it really is a relationship. And one of the purposes of this course is to encourage everyone to expand on and develop their relationship with the prayers as they appear in the siddur, and not to feel like chas v'shalom for some reason that because they're not, I didn't compose them, as if there's something distant from me. They're not. It's part of the practice of the. Yes, you want to ask a question? Sure. What's the question? We're going to talk about this. English, Hebrew, and no, yes, to your understanding of the words and so on. I'm going to get there. Well, okay. So, you pray with the Moroccan siddur. Yes, I know. So, which has the Shemot in it. I'm going to explain a little bit about it. Okay, and for simple people like ourselves, the utility of using such a siddur, and what the benefits are of making a transition slowly and gradually, but making a transition over to praying in Lashon HaKodesh if you can. We'll talk about the place of Lashon HaKodesh in the Tefillah. Okay, let's go on. So it's all good questions. I'm gonna get there. We'll get there. Okay, so we have. What was I saying? So I'm not so much interested in the particularities of Nusach, but if there's a specific question, I'm happy to try and answer it. But more with the order of prayers as a whole, and to kind of bring us back, for those who have great relationships with their siddur, wonderful, and we can always deepen the relationship. And for those of us who feel somewhat at a remove from the siddur, I want to try and help you so that you'll be able to have a stronger, closer relationship with the siddur, and that you'll feel like it's expressing more what you really want to say. So that's really what we're focused on. And some of the insights that I'm using are not specific to Breslov Chassidut. In certain places I'm going to be referring, so I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to be referring to. When referring to teachings from Rabbi Nachman about Tefillah or Reb Nosson, so a lot of it I'm going to be drawing from Otzer Hayira. Now, Otzer Hayira is nothing, it's not someone else's book. It's a collection of teachings from Likutey Moharan and Likutey Halachot broken down by subject matter. So it's very useful if you're looking for teachings of Rabbi Nachman on a particular subject. Otzar Hayira is very wonderful. It's kind of the extension of the book that's called Likutey Etzot. If you've seen Likutey Etzot in English, it's called Breslov Research Institute published it as advice. But it's very limited because it only brings, in the original edition, it only brings a selection of teachings from also very much out of context from Likutey Moharan. If you're not familiar with the lesson from which it's being drawn, you can make mistakes about what it means. And in addition, Otzar Hayir has the advantage of also bringing teachings from Reb Nosson. So you get a more rounded, more developed picture of the ideas. Otzar Hayira, is it in English? Very good question. I have no idea. I'm not the best source of knowing where the English Sfarim are, but you can write to Yossi Katz, you could write to Chaim Kramer, and ask if your Otzar Hayira is available in English. I don't think it is yet, but I'm sure at some point they're going to want to put it out. Okay, so that's so much for, and also I'll be telling you stories and anecdotes and things like that related to like what I just told you about the Chassid who had asked about changing his nusach. So those kinds of anecdotes tend to be found in the set of oral tradition and oral history of Breslov known as Siach Sarfei Kodesh, which was given over and recorded. This was oral teachings transmitted by Rav Levi Yitzchak Bender, Zichrono Livracha. He was a great teacher of Breslov in Yerushalayim and also in Uman before then from of this previous generation. So very often I'll be referring to kind of oral teachings that you wouldn't necessarily come across in other places that are collected in Siach Sarfei Kodesh. Now, in terms of the kind of structure of Tefillah and giving you the basic overview, especially of Tefillat Shacharit, so I am going to be referring quite a bit to this. Now, this is not a Breslov book. This is a book that is written by it's called Yedid Nefesh, and it's actually in the order of the siddur, but the first part of it has very important explanations on fundamental Kabbalistic ideas that have to do with the structure of your siddur. So the Yedid Nefesh was written by Rav Yechiel Bar Lev, who's alive now, and he has written a number of other books as well. One of them was translated into English, so if anybody is ever looking for a kind of English language compendium of Kabbalistic concepts according to the teachings of the Ramchal, you might take a look for a book called Yedid Nefesh. They translate it was in Hebrew it's Yedid Nefesh, but in English they called it Song of the Soul. I don't know if it's still in print, but for those of you who would like to get like a deeper understanding, if you've ever seen Avram Sutton's Inner Space or something like that. So this is much more rooted in the teachings of the Ramchal, and it's quite comprehensive. I just don't know if it's available still in print, but I know that it exists. So that's just to give you an idea of who this is. Yechiel Bar Lev, Rav Yechiel Bar Lev. Now he does have some Breslov associations because some of his children married into Breslov families here in Yerushalayim, and he may himself also Rabbi Sutton's book is called Inner Space, but that's just, I don't want to go into that subject. I'm just letting you know of another work that was authored by the author of the Yedid Nefesh, just so you know basically who he is. So that's Yechiel Bar Lev. Now, this has been, for me, being exposed to this really made a big difference to me in my understanding of Tefillah, so I want to share it with you. And Rabbi Nachman is sort of assuming, just like all of the great Gdolei HaChassidut, all of the great tzaddikim, they're assuming that these are ideas that you're probably familiar with, meaning when you open up Likutey Moharan or one of these other works, there is a basic assumption that you know, usually the assumption is you know quite a bit more than you may know. So, so when I'm talking about this idea of the structure of the prayers and how, let's say in the order of the prayers of the morning, how the different elements or segments of the tefillah, how they relate to each other, and what does that mean for you personally? So we're going to see, Rabbi Nachman doesn't talk about this necessarily overtly. It's just assumed in most of his lessons that you kind of know this, and we don't for the most part. So I want to share these ideas with you because they're sort of primary assumptions about the workings of tefillah, which you may not be familiar with at all. Okay, now so that's as we move through Shacharit, which is really going to take up a good amount, four sessions at least of this course, is going to be devoted to the 4 levels of the order of Shacharit. And that's going to has to be 4 sessions because we really need the time for each one of them. And Shacharit is really where the work is, because Minchah and Arvit, they're just kind of like, they are variations and they have their own flavor, but it's basically just extensions and further, they are just repetitions of some of the parts or variants on that which occurs during Shacharit. So Shacharit is really where most of the focus needs to be. And then afterwards, we're going to have a separate lesson or 2 on Mincha and Arvit. Okay, so here we are as women. Your obligations in Tefillah. There is quite a nice variation of opinions. There's a variety of opinions on what actually constitutes a woman's obligation in Tefillah. So I am not going to say that what we're learning, like if you haven't touched base with all 4 stages of Shacharit, let's say, and Mincha, let's say, in the course of a day, that you have not prayed. I'm not going to say that, even though there are those halachically who do, in terms of what's considered to be like the minimum obligation for a woman of prayer. It just really depends on your community. But I'll tell you a story. Everybody likes stories. So I have an old friend who, over the course of years, became very interested in Breslov. Now, she had gone through a lot of stuff that was very difficult. She had a long period of time. She really, really never opened a siddur. And we reconnected after many years of not seeing each other. She started coming to classes, and so she was mitchazeket, and she sort of, got herself more a little stronger about things. And one of the things that she said was, this is what happened. So she had asked me, way earlier on, she had said, I'm like, I've kind of got like I've detached from my siddur. What should I start? Like, I want to get back connected to my siddur. So what should I start with? Well, I said, okay, so like, well, where do you feel like you can start? So she started with brachot. She went back to saying brachot every day, and slowly but surely we tried to, build up more of a practice. Now, at a certain point, she still had a lot of resistance to saying Shemona Esrei every day. Okay, everybody is wherever they're holding. And being the kind of person that I am, I said, okay, so she said, I get much more out of saying Tikkun HaKlali every day. Am I really allowed to say Tikkun HaKlali if I don't yet say Shemona Esrei? So being the kind of person, I said, what do you mean allowed? I mean, you have certain chiyuvim. If you're not holding by fulfilling them, at least you should say what you feel like you can say. I'm very easygoing. She wasn't asking a rav; she was just asking me as a friend. So and so it went on. She had this practice of just saying morning blessings, and then maybe she was saying Shema. She wasn't saying Shemona Esrei. And then, but at some point during the day, she was making sure to say Tikkun HaKlali, which if you would ask a Rav, is this what you should, like if you have only so much time to spend on prayer, that's not what you would be told to do. So, but she didn't really ask me. Like we had that one conversation, then I never heard about it again. And I don't like to push. So one day she says to me, I started saying Shemona Esrei every day. I'm saying a more completed tefillah. I said, what happened? I'm so happy to hear it. What happened? So she said, well, I was on the bus, and she ran into somebody that we both know. And we both know her for a long time. She's very, very straight, not Hasidic, not Breslov, very straight Litvish. So she saw her saying, I don't know how exactly the conversation was, she saw her saying Tikkun HaKlali on the bus. She said, oh, that's nice, you say Tikkun HaKlali every day. She said, yeah. And she said, wow, you managed to daven, this is early in the morning, you got your davening done already before you left the house, your kids, taking the kids out. So this friend of mine said, well, actually, I'm still like, I don't know, I'm not always saying Shemona Esrei, but I make sure to say Tikkun HaKlali every day. And this mutual friend of both of ours looks at her and she said, Lo matim. Lo matim. Which in Hebrew is sort of like, it doesn't really, that like, no, that doesn't really suit you. You know, you're like a spiritual person. You should be saying the tefillah that you have an obligation to say. And when she told me this, and she said to me afterwards, this friend of mine said, she like jolted me, you know. And I started to laugh, and I said, you know, I'm so not a jolter. Like I don't like to do that kind of thing. So I said, it's a good thing you ran into her on the bus, because had you spoken to me, I would have been like, okay, you know, slowly. But you got one person who said to her, you know, you should be saying Shmuel Isaac at least once a day. And that kind of jolted her into feeling like, oh, really, I do need to do this. So I shared the story, and I'm not jolting anybody, but it's good to hear. Okay, now, so let's look at what I've brought you. Now, before we go into the whole order of the prayers, the efficacy of Lashon HaKodesh, specifically what their spiritual significance is, what the avoda of each one is, so that's going to be for the, you know, as we go on. But and of course, Rabbi Nachman being thoroughly preoccupied by tefillah, he's thoroughly preoccupied by prayer throughout Likutey Moharan, throughout all of his teachings. So he's very preoccupied by tefillah, throughout all of his teachings. So this is the second lesson of Likutey Moharan, in which he speaks about prayer as a whole. I'm not going to go through a lot of the lesson. I'm actually much more concerned with the first paragraph of the lesson, and then what Reb Nosson made of it in his Kitzur Likutey Moharan, how he translated that into practicalities for everybody. And then I want to tell you a story about it. So here's the lesson. It's the second lesson. It's called, we call this lesson Emor El HaKohanim, say unto the Kohanim, say unto the priests. And I'm going to start from the actual first paragraph. Now, it's really only the first line. I mean, so it's not really even the first, I guess it's just the first couple of lines that are of the most interest for our purpose right now. I'm just going to read it and translate and explain as I go. Ki ikar klei zeno shel Mashiach hu tefillah. The main weapon of Mashiach, or weapons of Mashiach, it's prayer. Shu b'chinat chotem. Now, prayer is related to the chotem, the nose. Which to say, what does prayer have to do with the nose? I'll give you a few connections between the two of them, but for now, let's just take it as a given that prayer and the nose are related. K'mo shekatuv, as it says, Utihilati echetam lach. And my praise, echetam lach. Now, echetam lach, as it says in Yeshayahu, so there's two different aspects of the word chotem. Chotem means your nose, and it also, chotem with a, not with a tet, but with a taf, right? I hope everybody can see it, right? We're talking here, not this letter tet, but if it was written, right? You can have the same sound with two different letters, taf, right? So, chotem with a taf as opposed to a tet means a seal, that which is sealed. And we know that prayer is associated with a seal, meaning that the seal we call the prayers of the Yamim Norim are called the seals of, you know, of the Gzerot, of the divine decrees, and they have an influence on divine decrees. And so the association in the word chotem, the nose, and the taf, chotem with a taf, which would be the seal. You know what I mean by a seal, you know, like S-E-A-L. So they're related. Now, the chotem, right, is you draw your life force, right, via the nose. You're not supposed to mouth breathe. You can exhale through your nose, but you're supposed to breathe in through the nose, through the mouth, but you're supposed to breathe in through the nose, right? And the breathing in through the nose, also the refinement of prayer, as David HaMelech says, is also called Tikon Tfilati Ktoret Lefanecha. My prayer should be as incense before you, as an incense offering before you, which means we have this association of the prayer rising like this beautiful smelling incense, which has all of its elements to it. We're going to get there. We're going to talk about Ktoret when we get through the order of the prayers a little bit. We'll talk about it. But the rising of the incense is considered to be like the ultimate in the quiet avodah, the quiet service of prayer. Think about what's the loftiest prayer when we had a Beit HaMikdash. The loftiest prayer of the year was the brief prayer of the Kohen Gadol, which was offered while the incense rose in the Beit Kodesh HaKodeshim. He would put a full chofen, a full handsful of incense on the fire pan, on the coals, and lay it on the floor in front of the Beit Kodesh HaKodeshim until the smoke was mitamer, as it says. It would rise in a column and then kind of circle over like a palm tree until it filled the upper part of the chamber, and that's considered to be the place of the quiet avodah, like Shmona Esrei, in a sense, where everything is done silently, but it rises and rises, right? So that's the and again, to be standing also in the straight place. That's the intimate place of prayer, is Shmona Esrei. We'll talk about that as we talk about the four levels of the prayer. So that's one thing. The other thing about the chotem, which is what he's going to say, Mashiach receives his vitality, means to say the soul of Mashiach receives his main vitality from prayer itself. Just like when you breathe through your nose and you have this, right, you draw in this breath, so that's what gives you vitality into the body. Mashiach also has the work of the chotem of drawing in life force, and the life force that's drawn to him is via the agency of prayer. Now, this is the next line that we really have to focus on. V'chol milchamto she'aseh. All of the wars that he's going to do, and kol hakvishot she'yichbosh, and all of the conquests that he's going to make. That means to say all of the changes, radical changes, beneficial changes that Mashiach is going to bring into the world. Hakol misham. Everything comes from there. It means to say from tefillah. Not from guns, not from bombs, not from politics, but from tefillah. K'mosh katuv, as it says, v'harecho birat Hashem. Now, in Yeshayahu, one of the descriptions of Mashiach is v'harecho birat Hashem, and he will. Now, there's two different ways of reading it. V'harecho birat Hashem means his very breathing and his very inhaling will be permeated with Yirat Shamayim. That means to say with the awareness of God. The other way of reading it is V'harecho Yirat Hashem means he has a nose for sniffing out Yirat Shamayim. That means to say the way in which he's going to be able to give tochacha, the way in which he's going to be able to guide people to change and become all that they need to become, is because he has a very sensitive nose, due to his tefillot, very sensitive nose, of being able to sniff out Yirat Shamayim in another, but it also means that his own nose is fully inhabited by fear of God. V'chulei. Zeh bechinat chotem. V'zeh yikar klei zeino. If you really want to know where Mashiach's power comes from, that's where it comes from. Today, after class, someone asked me, I had mentioned something in class, and her perspective on the subject was really coming from a very different kind of place. And afterwards, she came over to me and she said, I'm going to be having this. I'm going to be running this conference on a particular subject. On this is a somewhat controversial subject on encouraging people to be more active about going up to the Har HaBayit to pray. What do you think of that? So I told her my own understanding of it and explained to her why I think it's not necessarily the way that things are going to be accomplished. And I said, well, if a person wants to build a Beit HaMikdash, so the first thing that they have to do is make sure to get up for Chatzot every night and pray for the Beit HaMikdash and mourn over its loss. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know what you're talking about. What is Chatzot? I said, okay, so this is a problem. Meaning the pathway of action, of being like an activist, a Jewish activist. So the lesson that Rabbi Nachman is trying to get across to us is Mashiach activism is through following the derech of Mashiach, the pathway of Mashiach, and he's getting his vitality through tefillah. And so the work that we have to do, we're going to see that's how Reb Nassim is going to translate. It's very important. He says, no, he doesn't need bombs and he doesn't need guns. What he needs is tefillah, because tefillah empowers him. That's what empowers Mashiach. That's what empowers him, meaning in our own expression of prayer that the point of Mashiach should be revealed in the world. And in addition, Mashiach himself is vitalized through tefillah. K'mosh Ketuv, as it says, b'charbi uv'kashti. Yaakov Avinu, when he says that he conquered Shechem, he says, b'charbi uv'kashti, I conquered Shechem with my sword and my keshet and my bow. And Rashi says they're based on the Targum. The Targum Onkelos said doesn't render it as Chabi Kashti as my weapons. He renders it as Bitzlose Uveuse, with my prayers, with my supplications, meaning the weapons that the Jewish people hold and are active, that which we can activate in order to bring change in the world. It's Hakol Kol Yaakov. It's all associated with tefillah, not with physical agents. Now, it doesn't mean that sometimes it's not necessary to make use of physical means. I didn't say that. But ikar, you saw what it says, ikar klezeno. Upirish Rashi, tefillah v'kasha. The tefillah v'kasha, prayer and supplication, that Rashi offers there is based on the Targum. Now, k'moshe katuv, as it says, kilo v'kashti aftach v'chule. I do not, as it says, David HaMelech says, I will not trust in my bow. Ve'elokim hilalnu. We put our praise into God. B'chinat tzilati echetam lach. My chotem, as we said, we say is the agency of action and his identity. And I say the nose is associated with the identity. I'll just give you quickly just a halachic understanding. Why is your nose associated with your identity? Well, this is a halachic principle. It's a little gruesome. Forgive me for using the example, but this is the example from halakha. If a woman was married and her husband, chas v'shalom, disappeared, they don't know what happened to him. And they found the body. They found the body and they suspect that it's him. So someone has to identify the body. Now, if his face is intact, but his nose is missing, so he's not considered to be identifiable halachically. If any other part of the face is missing, chas v'shalom, but the nose is there, so according to the halacha, he can be identified. But if the nose is missing, it's considered to be as though his identity, which is expressed in the nose, really expresses the midot, the fullness of the midot. I'm not going to go into that right now, but I'm just going to tell you that the nose is associated with the attributes, the emotive attributes from Chesed until Yisod. So if those are gone, Ches v'Shalom, so then there's no way to identify the person. So when I say that, when Rabbi Nachman is alluding to the fact that Mashiach's own identity and his power and his ability to effect change in the world is related, that's called Tehilati Echetam Lach. It means that's the seal, it means that's the identity, and it's the agency through which he receives his life force. Everybody's with me, or have I gone off the rails and I've lost you? Are you with me? Or am I too, everybody, I want to make sure everybody's on the page with me. Okay, so if anybody has a question, you can ask, but I see nobody's asking, so I don't know if it's because I have it's hard to know if everyone's on the page. Okay, so this is in Likutey Moharan. This is the second lesson in Likutey Moharan. Now, the next thing that we're going to go to is what Reb Nosson does with it. Okay, now when we look at Reb Nosson, see, this is in Me'anachal. Ayin b'Likutey etzot ot tefillah shesham nizkar b'zeh lashon. Now, that means that we're talking now about what Reb Nosson does with this lesson. And look what he did. The statement in the original lesson is Ikar Klezino Shel Mashiach. But Reb Nosson says, orders from Dekot. Sorry. My son just got home. Okay. Ikar Klezino Shel Ish Yisraeli Hu Tefillah. You see what he did? Instead of the original lesson where it says this is the main weapon of Mashiach, he says this is the main weapon of every single Jew. ומובן מזה שאף שרבינו ז"ל כתב כאן עיקר כלי זין של משיח הוא התפילה בכל הכבישות וכולי. Now it's re-quoting again what happens in the lesson, meaning that it's clear there, it's talking about Mashiach. אך כוונת רבינו ז"ל הייתה שעיקר כלי זין של כל איש ישראלי הוא תפילה. That means to say the point of Mashiach, which is your active point inside of you that can affect change and bring about goodness in the world. That's called your Mashiach point. And so what applies to Mashiach as a whole, to Mashiach individually, applies to every single individual Jew personally. And so what that means is, as Rav Nosson translates it, right, is that this is the main weapon. And it means, what does it mean, a weapon? Like we're gentle people. Like I never bought my kids guns. I mean, they went and the boys made guns out of everything that they could get their hands on. But okay, but I didn't get them guns, right? I didn't let that. So we were like all peaceable people and pacifist people, and yet, nevertheless, we're fighting battles and we're waging war all the time. What is the Mashiach point? It means to say your tzaddik that's inside of you is called your Mashiach point that's inside of you. It's called the Moshe Mashiach point that's inside of every Jew. That's your strong point. That's your strongest self, is the part that can activate change and activate Geula in the world, because it is like it's all there. It's fine. It doesn't have. It's not messed up. It's not corrupted. It's not damaged. It knows what it needs to do, and it's very powerful. And the way in which it expresses itself and accomplishes what it needs to accomplish is also, just like with Mashiach, like this is true for everybody, is via tefillah. And all of the battles that we have to fight in the personal sphere means we have to overcome ourselves sometimes. And sometimes we have obstacles from without, right? Not just obstacles from within, but also from without, that require a lot of force and a lot of energy to overcome. Okay, and that keep us away from the objectives, the spiritual objectives we would like to carry out. All of this can be accomplished via the agency of prayer, because this is really what your weapon is. And the reason why we're doing this at the outset of this little course is because when you know this, it means to say, when I know that the thing that gives me vitality and strength to accomplish in this world everything that I need to accomplish is my tefillah. Of course, I'm going to strengthen myself and exert more energy in my tefillah. Right? If I know how important it is to my accomplishment, my survival, my growth, my forward motion, if I'm aware of that, then certainly I'm going to put in what I can. With such a weapon, you can conquer everything. It's called Nekudas. Gil Rachel asks, what's it called Kabbalistically? It's called the Nitzotz of Moshe, the Nitzotz of Mashiach, or the Nitzotz of Moshe, the spark. Shehu ish chayil pashut. So he says, and what if you're not a great davener, right? Like, what if you don't connect that well with the tefillah? What if it's hard for you to concentrate, or you don't know the language? How are you supposed to invest in something that feels so far away from you? So the recommendation that Rav Nosson makes is very beautiful. He says, so you have to imagine yourself like, if this is a war, then I'm a foot soldier, right? I'm an ish chayil pashut shegam hu lokeach kli zayin mibeit hamelech bekoach hasarim hamlamdim oto. You show up, you sign up, you get drafted. You don't know how to hold a gun. You don't know anything about anything. But the king drafts you and brings you into the base, right? You're brought into the base, and people who know better than you sit there and they train you so that you should be able to hold your weapon and do with it what you need to do. You don't have to be the big strategist, and you don't have to be the big warrior. You just have to be able to sort of follow instructions and go along with the program as it's been given over to you. And then you're a foot soldier carrying the weapon, because you have been empowered to do so by those who do have mastery over these weapons. So when you take a siddur in your hand, right? And it's very important to realize that when we pray with the siddur, we are praying what's called al dat tzadikim. We pray in accordance with the mastery that the tzaddikim who lived before us possessed. And so when you open your siddur, it's not so much, think of it as being, you have been given a tool that already has all of the koach inside of it, and you have to be able to just like pronounce those words. You want to be able to engage your heart and your mind to the best of your ability, but the siddur itself is an extremely powerful tool that you hold in hand that's just been bequeathed to you. It's been given to you. You're part of this army. You get a copy, okay? It can be Ashkenaz or Sfard. It could be Tilat Hashem or Edot Mizrach. That's not, it doesn't make a difference. I mean, I won't say it doesn't make a difference, but really, in essence, it doesn't make a difference. You get whichever nusach is matim for your soul root, hopefully, and it's going to do the work via you that it needs to do. And so we say, well, we're not big tzaddikim, like we don't know all the kavanot. There's so many hidden mysteries in the siddur, and that's true. But as long as you attach your mind, that means your awareness of what the actual words mean, and your heart, some degree of emotional arousal, as long as you attach those to the words that are in the siddur, you are doing the work. Okay, so you don't have to be the big tzaddik, you don't have to be the big lamdan, you don't have to be the big scholar or the big kabbalist. You do have to take hold of the siddur and do it. So everyone's got me on this one? Okay, so once we're aware of just how important it is, and that's really, Rabbi Nachman will come back with many beautiful diburim, many beautiful ideas to help us to feel, like the power of it and the wonder of it, that we've been given this gift of the siddur. It's not an ol, it's not, it's interesting, an ol, in Hebrew, an ol means, it's translated as a yoke. And so we were talking back and forth, maybe Devorah's, Debbie Howarth, are you on? Are you with us? Remember we were talking a while back about the yoke? And I think it was with you. So it's like, what is the yoke? Y-O-K-E, not Y-O-L-K. The Y-O-L-K is in your egg. The Y-O-K-E is what you place on the back, across the shoulders of the ox, so that you can, so that the ox can do work that would otherwise be too difficult or onerous for it to do. Meaning it gives it leverage. The yoke is usually a post, a kind of post that goes across the back. It's attached to the strong part of the shoulders of the ox, and so it allows the ox to pull the plow, to bear the wagon, whatever it might be, its task. And so the yoke is not a burden. The yoke is actually the thing that makes what would otherwise be burdensome, makes it possible to do the work, to do the strong work. And so when it says that we have to take upon ourselves the ol, so there's the concept of the ol malchut shamayim, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, but that we'll talk about more when we get to Shema. Now I'm just talking about the ol that people feel, a kind of, like the onus, that's O-N-U-S, this kind of burden of responsibility, to pick up the siddur, to do what you have to do. And there is a kind of ol to it because it's a discipline. But it's the discipline that allows you to accomplish something that you would really otherwise not be able to accomplish. So even though it's true, the hitbodeduyot, the private prayers, are very important, really wonderfully important. But what they have as their advantage, they lose. They also have as a disadvantage, meaning they may be yours, but then they're also only as effective as you're able to make them effective. Whereas the tefillot that are in the siddur are already all that they need to be, and the discipline in that practice is that you try and apply yourself to them and allow them to speak for you. We'll talk about this more as we go on. Allow them to speak for you as well as you possibly can. So that's and it's a totally different type of avoda. It's very different kind of avoda. They're related types of spiritual work, but they're not the same. Okay, now I said I wanted to tell you a story. We still have about 10 minutes. So I'm going to tell you a story about the revelation of this lesson. Now, I only gave you the first little paragraph of this lesson because it's really quite long. It goes into a whole bunch of other areas. But I do want to share the lesson with you, the story that's related to the lesson. Now, there's two different versions of it. There's a short version in Siach Sarfei Kodesh, and there's the longer one from Tovot Zichronot. And I would like to do the one that's somewhat longer from Tovot Zichronot because it includes detail that's not in the short version. Was given over by Rav Levi Yitzchak Bender, and Rav Avram Sternhardt, who was his teacher, is the one who wrote Tovot Zichronot, and he has a much longer version of it with more detail. Rav Avram Sternhardt was the author of this, and the one who transmitted the story was Reb Noson's grandson. So I'm going to just read it and explain it to you as we go. It's a fascinating story. Now it says in Tovot Zichronot, which it was recorded by Rav Avram Sternhardt. It says, HaTorah Beit Emor HaKohanim. This lesson that we just started now, which is called Say Unto the Kohanim. Kefi shmuva b'Likutey Moharan michtav yad shel Avi Zikni Moharan Zal. So we have some detail about this story that's brought in Reb Noson's biography of Rabbi Nachman. That's called Likutey Moharan. It was translated. I never remember whether tzaddik is the exact translation of Likutey Moharan or Until the Mashiach. I always get them confused. There are two different biographical works that were published in English by Breslov Research Institute. One of them is a straight translation of Likutey Moharan. The other one incorporates a lot more detail from other biographical sources. So I always get confused which one is which. You can check if you're interested in such a book. I would recommend the one that's more comprehensive, not just the Likutey Moharan. But if you're going to invest in one, I would say get the one that's more comprehensive, that includes other details, and that goes also in exact chronological order. And it might be Until the Mashiach. Now, So Rav Avram Sternhardt tells us that the original detail of the story, this is what he says, Nemral Yudei Siba Shel Harav Hatzadik Shmuel Isaac Zal. Shmuel Isaac is sitting here, my little boy Shmuel Isaac, so you heard his name, but I'm telling the story name is the Betach Shav Sipur al Reb Shmuel Isaac She'ata Nikra Shmo. So I just told my son Shmuel Isaac that this is the story about Reb Shmuel Isaac that you're named after. Anyway, so Reb Shmuel Isaac was one of Rabbi Nachman's original students, and he was a very powerful person. He was powerful physically. Rabbi Nachman gave him a particular pathway in prayer. It's important to know. Very, very specific pathway in prayer that he followed for many, many years, and so, which we know some details about it. So, and I might have mentioned it a while back in another course. It was called Sichat Evarim. Leave it for now. But so this was at the beginning of their relationship. Now, Reb Shmuel Isaac was one of Rabbi Nachman's earlier Talmidim, and that was when Rabbi Nachman, before he had even come to Breslov. That was meaning before Reb Nosson had gotten close to him, because Reb Nosson also only developed a relationship with Rabbi Nachman after Rabbi Nachman had moved to Breslov. It was right after he moved from Zlatipolye. So Zlatipolye, when he was still there, this happened to Shmuel Isaac. Shechalam. Reb Shmuel Isaac dreamt. It was in the winter. He dreamt that he was be'eze yar gadol. He was in a great forest. And he couldn't find his way out of the woods to get home. Pagabo eze ish echad shechaga becherev chada sheish b'shtei piyot nikra sherfen. And he met up in the woods with a man who was wearing attached to him was what's the word? Girded. He was girded with a sword that was a double-edged sword. V'nechrad harav Shmuel Isaac meod. You meet a guy in the forest that you don't know, a stranger. This was in the dream. You meet a guy in the forest who's carrying a double-edged sword. It's a little scary. But in the dream, the man in the woods with the double-edged sword, he was very appeared to be very friendly. Don't be afraid of me. And they walked together in the woods until they came to a very large house in the middle of the woods. And the man said to Shmuel Isaac, go into the house. I want you to know, in that house, there are a lot of swords that are much smaller than the sword that I'm carrying. And you have permission, you can go and take from the smaller swords. But you have to know how to use that sword, whatever the small sword that is suitable for you. You have to know how to use it judiciously. Memutza means down the middle path, down the middle line. Shmuel Isaac in the dream, he went into the house. Yashav sham zaken echad, and there he encountered an old man. Amarlo, Iyevshar l'chalikach mipo shum cherev ad shtagish b'atzmacha she'ata menuke miktamim b'kufcha u'b'vritcha. The old man said to him, you can't take one of these swords unless you really feel within yourself that you're cleansed of the personal flaws and especially sexual issues. So you have to really feel like you're free of these things before you can take the sword. You have to know how to hold this sword properly, the one that you take from here. And in the middle of this conversation, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, he felt himself surrounded by many, many clouds and many, many obscuring veils. And the old man pushed him out of the house. He said, and you're really you're not ready for this because of all of these clouds. You can't even see clearly. But if you keep on going and you come to the city, you're going to find yourself that there's a craftsman and he knows how to sharpen the small swords. And even that man that you met in the forest who had that double-edged sword, that big sword, even he goes to that man to go to get his sword sharpened. But who knows if he's going to let you in? The craftsman who knows how to sharpen the swords. This was Reb Shmuel Isaac's dream. And suddenly he woke up. And the dream affected him very profoundly. He was very disoriented from it, and his heart was pounding very much from it. This was right at the beginning, just before his, or right at the very outset of his relationship with Rabbi Nachman. Rav Shmuel Isaac Ayagar Be'ir Dashiv. He lived in the town called Dashiv. And at that point, Rabbi Nachman lived in Zlatipolia. Dashiv is over in the area, for those who are familiar with the region, in the area between Breslov and Uman. That's where Dashiv is. It's close to Breslov. Zlatipolia is all the way to the west. It's not on the. It's really not on the map over there. They're quite far apart. Rav Shmuel Isaac Shmuel Isaac was very, very poor. And he decided that since he had just begun a relationship with Rabbi Nachman, that he really had to force himself, even though it was very difficult to pay for the journey, he's going to go to Rabbi Nachman in order to be able to speak to him about this. He did whatever he had to do. And even more, not only he wasn't able to get that much money together, so part of the journey he was able to pay for, because I guess he begged money from people or borrowed money from people, and whatever he couldn't afford, he walked. So he actually went on foot for part of the journey, a better part of the journey. Here, when he got to Zlatipolia, it was in the winter. And it's very difficult to go over there, to go walking around on foot, place to place in the winter is like not only difficult, it's very dangerous. So it was the middle of the winter, he got to Zlatipolia. He didn't really know exactly where Rabbi Nachman's house was. He asked somebody, Amarlo, Malachet Slo, Halo Machloket Gadol Alav Ba'ir. At that point, it was already towards the end of Rabbi Nachman's residence in Zlatipolia. Already the Shmuel Isaac, who was the reigning, last, oldest surviving Talmid, student of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. So at that point, there was a lot of conflict between the two of them. The Shmuel Isaac had a problem with Rabbi Nachman, which I'm not going to get into now. And so the person that Rabbi Shmuel Isaac encountered when he got to Zlatipolia and he asked him, where does Rabbi Nachman live? The guy said to him, you want to go to him? Don't you know that there's machlokas on him? Don't you know that people are saying terrible things about him? It says, "V'niskar b'ma she'amar lo hazaken, mi yodei im tuchal liftoch sham, shetuchal lichnos etzlo." And at that point, Reb Shmuel Isaac remembered in the dream that the old man had said to him, "Who knows if you'll even be able to get in there?" Right? So that's what it reminded him of. Like now he's already at the place and he's done so much self-sacrifice to get there, but who knows if he'll even find his way. When he finally found his way to the house, it was indeed locked. And he knocked and knocked on the door. I mean, it's the middle of the winter. He knocked and knocked. until he heard a very faint voice coming from behind the door. Shadonenu Moreno v'Rabbeinu omer lo, ata Shmuel Isaac. He heard from behind the door that Rabbi Nachman said to him, "You're Shmuel Isaac. Ein ka'et efsharut liftuach lecha b'shum ofen." It's impossible to open for you right now. Rav Shmuel Isaac amad be'erech sha'ah u'bacha b'kol b'lev nishbar kazeh. Shmuel Isaac was locked out of the house. Rabbi Nachman wouldn't let him in. He was cried for about an hour, very, very broken heart, with a very great broken heart. Patach lo Adonenu Morainu v'Rabbeinu zal. In the end, after an hour of his crying, Rabbi Nachman let him in. Amar lo, halo amru lecha od bebeitcha mi yodeim tuchal lichnos. Rabbi Nachman said to him, didn't they tell you at home, before you even set out, maybe you won't be able to come in? Ach kiyamti kol hasharim, says, ach kiyamti kol hasharim nin'alu b'shait mot shebachita kol kach lo nin'alu. He said, but I've done what the sages said, that even when all gates are locked, the gates of tears are not locked. It means to say, by turning him away, he triggered the deep crying of Rav Shmuel Isaac, which itself was the way that spiritually was opening the gate for him. So he said, that's why I was able to open. As soon as Rabbi Nachman spoke that way, Rav Shmuel Isaac realized that Rabbi Nachman already knew the details of his dream, and it scared him very much. He was afraid to say anything further. Toch kach amar lo Adonenu Morainu Rabbeinu, halo ananim rabim sivavucha. Without him having to say anything, Rabbi Nachman interjected, and he said, there are a lot of clouds that were surrounding you. Nifhal v'nishtomem Rav Shmuel Isaac. Rav Shmuel Isaac was very, very disoriented to hear this display of Ruach HaKodesh that Rabbi Nachman had, that he knew things that he shouldn't have known. He was in such a state, he was no longer able to even say a word about the dream. He was so like shocked out of his wits. So he didn't open up his mouth. He wasn't able to say anything. At that point, a whole bunch of other Hasidim came over to spend Shabbos with Rabbi Nachman from Medvedevka. And it was on that Shabbos that Rabbi Nachman taught the second lesson that's recorded in the Likutey Moharan about the power of prayer and the sword. Now I'm just going to tell you, because we've got to finish. I'll tell you from outside. Anybody who goes through the entirety of the lesson there can see how from Shmuel Isaac's dream and everything that happened to him, how everything was alluded to. So by the time he showed up, and this happened many times, by the time he showed up to Rabbi Nachman's house or heard the lesson, all of the detail of that which he had gone through or that was on his mind was made clear via the teachings that are in the lesson. Now, just to finish off, in that lesson about the weapon, right? So it's a double-edged sword. It has different aspects to it, which is true, and we're going to talk about them as we go through the siddur. We have shivcho shel makom, we have bakasha, we have the parts of prayer that are praise and thanks, and then we have the other side of the sword, which is the actual asking for that which we need. So those are called, it's called a two-edged sword. And David HaMelech called it cherev pipiot biyadam. There is a double-edged sword in their hands, and it has to cleave to the middle path, right? It has to be wielded with a lot of mishpat. It has to be wielded very, very carefully because it's a powerful weapon. And so, Bezrat Hashem, I hope through the course of the next 2 months, we have 2 months, Bezrat Hashem, we will start to feel like we know how to make good use of the weapon that is Mashiach's weapon and is everybody's weapon. Okay. Have a beautiful week. And we will continue Bezrat Hashem next week. So I think that pretty much the order in the course description that's up there on the page, I think that's, we're going to be pretty much sticking to that order as we go through some kind of some general, another lesson or two that are general about Tefillah, more specific than 4 classes, Bezrat Hashem, on the order of Shacharit, and then Minchah and Maariv, and the Tefillah b'tzibur. We have a few things to cover, and of course, it's always just an introduction, right? It's always just a beginning. Have a beautiful, beautiful week.